My leadership style is, I've been told this since I was 10. I'm too intense. And what that shows up is sometimes for people that work for me, it shows up as intimidating. Is for people I work with, it's showing up as competitive. And for people I've worked for, sometimes it shows up as challenging. So, like, I've been told this since I was 10. I've been working on it. I've gone to 20 years of therapy. Like, I've gotten better. But I think the thing at the end of the day is, how do you, as a leader, drive people in a direction or help define the direction and help support people to move in that direction with urgency and dispatch without stressing them out too much? Like, have you seen that? There's a great graph that shows like effectiveness versus pressure. And like you exert pressure, and people become more and more effective. And then you hit the point where they start to shut down. They start to shut down because they're starting to feel too stressed. I guess it's stress and output or something. They're just too stressed.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the All Innovation, the AI podcast. Once again, your trusty co-host, Mr. Dante McClain, is joining me, Mr. Keenan Hart, and we've got another amazing leader sitting across this table with us. Randy Wootton is joining the show. Now, Randy, you've been described as a scale-up CEO, but we know that's not where you get started in your leadership journey in business. So why don't you give a little bit of background about who you are, where you came from, and what makes you so powerful in the roles that you kind of execute on today?
Well, I don't know how powerful I am, but I'll give you a little bit of background. I do think there's probably two types of people. They're in B2B SaaS. I don't know more about the world writ large, but you have people that are really motivated as founders. They identify a pain in a specific industry or that they're living themselves, and they feel so compelled about it that they want to go out and solve that problem. And they're usually technical. And they have a technical solution for a complicated problem, workflow automation or whatever. That's what we think of the classic Silicon Valley founders. Those are the people we revere. It's the Bill Gates of the world. It's the Steve Jobs of the world. And many of them can go all the way, right? They can take the company, Mark Zuckerberg, et cetera. They take it all the way, launch a public company, and are able to deal with each of those different inflection points of growth, which we can talk a little bit about. There's another type of profile, which is more of the operations folks. So the people that think about, hey, how do you build scalable systems, process, and teams? And that's what I'd put myself in. It's more of the professional CEO that comes in when a founder may have decided that they no longer want to be managing people. They want to go back and be CTO, or they want to just be in the code. They might want to be strategy guy or gal. So I think there are these inflection points of the types of problems you're dealing with every day change as you get bigger, and there's different stage appropriate talent you bring on board.
And so you didn't always start here. I know in our last conversation, you talked a little bit about your history in the Navy. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looked like? And then, what made you aspire to become this seasoned CEO?
Well, I think it really started back when I was in high school and knew that I wanted to serve in the Navy, and I went to the Naval Academy. I was fortunate enough to be admitted, and that was great. I got to go fly in jets. I wasn't a pilot. I was a bombardier navigator. I sat next to the pilot and bitched, but it was super cool. Flying off aircraft carriers, did a bunch of missions over Iraq, not during time of war, but just still in the Persian Gulf, and do my part to serve. And when you go to the Naval Academy, I think people who go there know that they want to be involved in some type of leadership. You wouldn't go otherwise, right? It's a leadership laboratory like the West Point or Air Force as well. And then what you want to lead is you're bred to want to be a captain of a ship or of a squadron. And not everyone can for a variety of reasons. I chose to leave after 8 years in the military, and though made the transition via business school into the corporate sector, and I had the good fortune to be accepted at Harvard. And Harvard also is one of these schools where it's really about general management and general leadership, and they bring in enormous number of CEOs to campus. You could probably go to 3 or 4 different talks every single day. And so you start to think about, oh gosh, well, maybe I want to be CEO one day. And for me, there was a transition of the aspiration of being a captain of a ship or an admiral in the Navy to that translating to, well, maybe I could be a CEO one day. So it was in the back of my mind in terms of that's what I would like to do. And as I went into the corporate sector, we can talk a little bit about the different stages and such. But I always found myself gravitating towards leadership roles. That becomes like a product manager overseeing a product. It becomes like a general manager where you're overseeing several functions. And then if you get the opportunity as CEO, you get to oversee all the functions. And so I do feel in some ways I was on this trajectory since I was 14 or 15, and I've been in a C-suite role, CEO, CRO, or CSO since 2015, and it's great. I mean, it comes with a lot of pressure, and it's a lot of late nights and a lot of days standing, looking at the abyss and wondering what's going to happen next. But it's a tremendous honor.
So, one of my favorite sayings is like, there is no stool without three legs. And if I think about the stool of Randy, right,
Yeah.
he's got core pillars of skill sets underneath him that have helped him be the leader who he is today.
Yeah.
So what are the core pillar skill sets that you think you need to be that, hyper growth, grow the CEO type of organization leader?
Wow, that's a great question, Keenan. I think, I guess when I think about the profile of people that are successful, professional success, not personal success, I think there's a balance. I think when you first are growing up, and I'll just back up a little bit, I think everything you're validated by is for IQ, right? Think about when you go to high school, you get good grades, you go to good college, you get good grades, you go off and get your first job based on your IQ. I think when you get into the corporate sector, you realize over time that it's not just IQ, it's actually EQ. Right, EQ, the ability to influence people. So there is this transition you make in terms of, I'm going to show you I'm the smartest person in the room, to, oh wait, I got to figure out how I'm going to get the broad group of people, usually a committee, to make a decision. So in the military, we used to talk about lead, follow, or get out of the way. And some people say, oh boy, that's so stark. But I do think it's a really interesting point. It's like, look, you can either be a follower or you can be a leader. If you're not going to be one of those, then get out of the way because you're just slowing us down. In the corporate sector, when I first got to Microsoft after having been at a startup, I also in my head, I was like, oh, it's really lead, follower, let's talk about it. Because you spend all this time in these meetings, and I thought it was totally unproductive. And I think that's what you'll find a lot of people will say about large corporations and bureaucracies, is you kind of have the meeting before the meeting, and they're going to close off for the meeting after the meeting. So I do think, though, there is something about like being super clear on what's the decisions going to be made. How's that decision going to be made? Are we going to do it in consensus, or is it going to be my decision? Or is it going to be your decision? Like, I don't care. It could be your decision, Dante. You tell me what you need from me to make the decision. So I think IQ, EQ, and then I think there's just this thing about grit. Like, you've got to be able to work hard. And I tell people, like, I wasn't the smartest guy at Harvard, but I was going to work harder than anybody else because I knew the least going there. And so no one was going to out-hustle me. And so I think there's a difference in the hustle you do as a founder, where you have this conviction about the future and you're an evangelist and you're bringing people up the hill, versus what my job is as a scale-up CEO is to how do you take an organization and build that capability, establish a strategy, inform the structure, help people figure out what the right roles and responsibilities are, help define the sales process, the systems, process, and tools, and then ultimately creating a comp system, how do you put the compensation in place from salary, bonus to stock.
So you talked a little bit about these inflection points in business, and my ears kind of perked up. I think that'd be a really fascinating conversation. What are these inflection points in business? And for anyone listening, like, why do people or companies get stuck within these transitions?
Yeah. So I'm not the first person to say this. I think the magic number is $1 million. If you can get to $1 million, you have product market fit. That's usually driven by a founder CEO doing founder sales. They haven't hired anyone else behind them except for other engineers, and they got Bob, their uncle, doing their books. Once you get to about $1 million, maybe you're going to take some private money. You got to sort things out. You're going to then move to, in our world with Maxio, we talk about billing and financial operations. You're going to move to probably like a fractional CFO or an outsourced CFO, or maybe bring on a controller to help you get your books sorted. And so I think that's that first inflection is, are you going to move? Are you going to be bootstrapped, or are you going to take private money? If you're going to take private money, how do you get your company ready for that? And it's a combination of just getting your financials in the right place and starting to move forward. When you get to, so from $1 million to 10 million, you'll take some money from some investors. $10 million, I think very few software companies, I forget what the statistic is, but it's very few actually make it to 10. At 10 million, you start to slow down, because now you're going to have to start hiring people. You can't be the founder sales for every deal now. Now you got to hire a CRO or VP of sales. Now you got to hire a head of customer success. Now you got to hire marketing. So now you got to go start to leverage through people. And those are all expenses that you're layering on top of an organization. And so, oh God, now you're starting to burn money, like real money, because you started to hire people. But you're never going to move from 10 to 50 or 10 to 100 million until you have some of that infrastructure in place.
So I'm looking at the statistics just from a Google search, right? It says only a small fraction of SaaS companies, roughly 0.4%, ever reach 10 million in ARR.
Yeah, that's so exactly. So now you say, oh, okay, well now you're in rarefied air, right? So now I think the next inflection point, I call it the valley of death, is if you're between 20 and 30 million, about 100 million, because now it's starting to, you're scaling to everything. That's where I come in. Right, help to sort out, okay, where's the strategy? You've moved from one product to multiple products. You probably moved from one segment to multiple segments. You may move from one region to multiple regions. So now you have this complexity. It's no longer one product, one prospect, close the deal, get up and going. You've got this complexity that you have to manage. And I think if you can get to 100 million, you're off to the races. Your financial model is secure, or mostly your business model is probably predictable. You've got investors that are in for the long haul. And so, not that it's smooth sailing, I'm not saying that at all, but I've seen the military at 1 million people. I've seen Microsoft at 100,000. I was at Salesforce when it was 14,000. I sold a company to Seismic. They must have been about 1,000 people when I was there. And then I've run companies as small as 30 to we're about 240 people. And I think that you see these inflection points at 1 million, 10, call it somewhere in that 20 to 50, and then 100 million is a different game. So I'm the guy between 10 and 20 and about 100 million.
Is it all about the boring stuff, right? In that inflection point between 10 and 100 million? Because I mean, if we think about entrepreneurs and like the profile of a founder, right? Often we're super excited. We're the evangelists. We're on the cutting edge, talking about what the future is going to look like. And then a lot of people find themselves saying like, dude, I like starting these things up. I like building momentum, but the execution of the daily process, the boring work, I feel like is that extinction event that kind of pushes a lot of people out.
Keenan, you're killing me calling that boring. I mean, I will tell you it's a different type of magic, but I do think that you put your finger on the issue, is that there are people who are more oriented towards, hey, I want to solve the initial problem versus I want to scale the operations. I love working with people to solve problems and working through organizations. And so like optimizing things, that's not what a natural founder, tech founder may be interested in. They may be able to flex into that. But the thing I think about is like having been at the Naval Academy and having been in the Navy for a while, like you don't get paid a lot of money in the Navy. What you're there to do is serve your country and take care of your people. And I think software is a people business. And the thing I take the most pride in is, now I've been around for a while, I'm old, gray hair, is having people call me or reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, I made an impact on their life. Or they're calling me to say, hey, they're thinking about the next stage of their career and they found our relationship valuable. Could we spend some time together? So I think that the interesting part of this next the next stage for me is not the technology necessarily. I think you have to have great tech. It's more about how do you unlock the potential of the people that you're working with. And that, to me, is magic. Going back to how do you figure out, lead follow or get out of the way versus lead follow, let's talk about it, but let's talk about it in a way that's moving us forward.
I mean, here's a question for you, Randy. Me and Dante talk often about a group chat, right? That Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, has, where he says there's going to be a $1 billion unicorn that is going to be a one-man team. Yeah. So how do you kind of think about tools like AI as an example, transforming the productivity and everything else about the current team? Has it changed the way that you look at building infrastructure in an organization, or what's your kind of 2 cents on this new wave of tech?
I would say, I think of AI, again, not the first person to say this, right? I never have an original idea, but I would say there's probably at least 3 dimensions along which you want to looking at AI. One is personal, like how are you doing it to be smarter as a human? I use ChatGPT every single day to help me draft emails. We wrote our operating plan. I threw it through ChatGPT and said, hey, summarize this, make it more applicable for millennial and shorten it. It came back and it was like, this is great. I could not have asked for a better editor. I think so. That's one use case. How do you get better with your own productivity? Doing models or whatever. The other use case that everyone really needs to do is be on the cutting edge of the technologies that they're using and how they're using AI. So we use Zendesk, and we're thinking about how is AI using in our primary support, because there's going to be an expectation that you drive efficiency in your organization, not through training, but through the application of AI, in this case, augmented intelligence. So to your point, Keenan, like how many roles do you not need if you have AI support chat? I feel sorry for people who are just starting their career now, because it's like, well, what am I going to do? Which job am I going to do? Because we're working with a company, I won't use its name, but we're using a company that provides us one service. We had 3 people that were kind of working on the account. They've replaced them with agents. What they're doing, they've replaced them with agents. Now they're not charging us less. So what does that mean? They've just made an enormous amount of profit, right? Because now they've been able to charge us the same, and they could argue we're providing the same value, we just don't have to do it with people. So they've gotten smarter with how they deliver their services. I think that's going to happen everywhere. And then the third dimension of AI is if you are really a system of record, if you really have data that's differentiated and unique, you should be thinking about how do you become an intelligence engine. So we're workflow automation right now. We do billing automation and revenue management for B2B SaaS companies. I tell the team, we got to move into this world of intelligence engine. What we're wrestling with is we aren't native AI. So our database isn't structured to layer in that intelligence engine on top. We've done an enormous amount of work to build out the API and the services and all that other stuff that I don't understand. So we're getting close. But for us to compete with the startups that are coming in the market today in the same category, is you got to have AI powering your core technology if you do have real data that's unique to you.
So I want to break that down for everybody, and Dante, I'll let you take this. So you talk about AI needs to be viewed through 3 lenses. We talk about personal, right? How we're utilizing these tools to be more effective. Number 2 is what I kind of put a bucket around, was operational. So how are we utilizing this stuff? And then your third point, which is the third leg of the stool, which is that data management. How are you guys using your data to become better, and the value proposition that you guys actually take to the marketplace as well?
Yeah, I think that's right. There's probably something else I'm missing in the world. I will say, I actually was talking to a guy, Stephen Froth at Ibica. They're a pricing partner that has helped us do some pricing on, and we can talk about that too. Like pricing and monetization is a huge deal, but we just did a survey together on agentic AI. So agent AI, where you have agents working with agents and how people are using it. So I do think there's going to be another evolution of AI in terms of, well, what's your agent that you're using and representing? So it's not just like for us, for example, the AI use case that we have right now is people can use it to help with collections, right? You can look at all your data and find out which customers might collect and which ones won't, and how to engage with them, how to send out the emails in what sequence to get them to collect. So you don't call on the phone and saying, hey, pay me my bills. You could imagine that there could be an agent in front of that could be interacting with an agent for your client, customer, and they're interacting, right? Outside of any person's purview, just they're saying, hey, here's our collection report in terms of these segments, these customers. Fascinating. Like I think about procurement. Like we have, 100 B2B SaaS companies. I would love to have an agent that could act as an outsourced procurement across all these SaaS companies we're buying and find out what the best price is, negotiate it, figure it out, and we wouldn't have to deal with it. So I think there is this agentic AI, which is right on the cusp of coming in as maybe a fourth element of AI that we're just starting to explore.
Randy, I'm curious your take on this idea. So we talked a lot about using agents and using AI to augment or in some cases displace human employees who do the day-to-day. One thought is that the size of teams are going to collapse, which also means companies are going to spend less. But the other side of the coin is, hey, companies are going to have or expect more output and try to really push the envelope with the extra capital that they have lying around. I'm curious your take on that idea.
Well, let me talk to the first one, and then we can come back to the second one, because I think I understand the first one. So the first one, I think you're spot on, is if you need fewer people, you need less capital, right? It used to be the reason why you took VC money was to go buy a bunch of boxes because there was no AWS or Google Cloud. Today, you can get up and running on AWS and reserve what you need in terms of compute, and you can keep going. And so I think if you have other things like people are using AI SDRs. People are using, there's this great company, a good friend of mine from business school has started called Velocity Engine, and they've created a go-to-market platform that's all AI powered, and we're using them to come up with a campaign brief, a set of assets, ebooks, white papers, advertisements, all targeted for a segment that we want to go win, all done within their platform based on all the stuff we've logged in. So that's another example of where, my marketing team is getting leverage from that. We would have had to hire, 2 or 3 people to do everything that they're doing. So I do think your first point is you're going to need less capital. And so your relationship with the VCs is going to change in terms of how much capital you're going to take and over what time.
The second part of the question is, now that these companies have more capital, are they going to just save that money, or are they going to look to do more in different ways with that capital?
Yeah, I look, at the end of the day, the CEO and the CFO's responsibility is to be stewards of capital, and that's short-term, long-term, and you want to secure enough that can support your plan. And so I think, will this allow people either with the capital they currently have to reframe the opportunities that they want to go after that they may not have been because their burn rate has improved? Certainly. I think investors, if I were an investor, I would be looking at that capital and saying, look, if you're not going to use that capital effectively, then I need to go put it someplace else. And so maybe the VCs are going to be able to have bigger funds, and they're going to be able to work with more companies because each company is more efficient. And so, VCs get richer, right? Because they're diversify their portfolio more. I think LPs, the people who invest in those VCs or PEs, are going to be expecting a different return. I will tell you, I saw a slide going around with my CEO friends about what was the efficiency expectation that VCs were expecting from AI. It was like 30%. So if you think about your cost, dollar per FTE. So I think there's 2 ways you can think about, and this is one of these scale up, boring Keenan things that we talk about.
I'm gonna let you take it. Yeah, go ahead.
Is the 2 leverage points that when you're looking at an investment. Well, there's a bunch, but 2 I'd give you. One is your ARR per FTE. So how much money are you making per FTE? If you're able to make more money with fewer FTEs, to your point, Keenan, if you can go public, like you've got infinite, right? The other one is your cost per FTE. So how much are you spending? And what you found, I think, over the last 5-10 years is there's been more and more pressure on companies to get profitable. They've been looking at things like low-cost labor markets. And so when you go through COVID, what happened? Everybody, I don't even know where you guys are sitting. You could be in, Timbuktu, but we're having a great conversation powered by the interweb. And I think what you're finding is we have people in the Philippines, Buenos Aires, Krakow, Poland, Spain. Other than just the time zone of trying to meet with people, now you can get access to lower cost labor in a global economy. Well, at least until we put tariffs up and crush everything. But that changes that relationship in terms of how you're deploying the capital. And that changes those 2 metrics, ARR per FTE and cost per FTE. And so you can get a lot more leverage out of that. And so then you have to take less money if you're the founder. And ultimately, as you guys know, when you take money, you're giving up control.
Yep.
So if you're able to take less money, maybe that means more founders are able to retain control of their investment through, years, and are able to, you'll see less situations where VCs or PEs are replacing founders.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were mentioning that, like, hey, how does the dynamic change of leverage, right, between VCs and these early founders? Because often when we take huge injection, right, we're giving up huge control, which means that somebody on the other side can pull the strings on what your organization is going to look like in the future.
That's right.
And that's a power dynamic shift that I think we're going to experience over the next years here, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah, another thing that you didn't ask, but I'm just going to put it out on the table. So we are a billing and invoicing tool at Maxio. So we help B2B SaaS companies do billing, automation, and revenue recognition. What you find in the billing space right now, or in SaaS monetization, is the historical model has been what they call seat-based pricing. So you charge based on the number of seats. What is developing now, driven by consumption models, but really the AI companies are the ones that are really making a lot of noise around it, is what we call usage-based billing. And so you're billing based on a metered component. So think like cell phones. How much data have you used? What you're going to see is most companies are going to have to embrace both. They're going to have to embrace like a platform fee, some sort of seat-based, and then they're going to have some usage component. If you consume X, you're going to pay Y. what's going to shake the investment community is we have a lot of experience about how to pattern match with companies that are doing seat-based pricing. This usage-based pricing, where you have volatility by month, by day, in terms of some customers going up and down as you go cross months, like what do you do with their ARR, is going to radically shape how CEOs need to represent their business and what is ARR, what they call recurring versus recurring revenue, and then how investors value that. And so I think not only is AI going to challenge some of the assumptions in terms of the social contract, but I think just the business model is going to change. And Mark Benioff has called this out. Satya Nadella has called this out. And Mark Benioff was the guy that really invented the SaaS business model where you deploy software and you pay for it out of OpEx, not CapEx. He revolutionized that market, and he's out there banging the drum about this next revolution.
I want to talk a little bit about the revolution of growing teams, right? So we talked about the global economy that we can now tap into. So you can get high talent, lower or higher return on the money that you're investing into these markets, right? But how are you thinking about creating culture, right? Especially in a global remote world now, because when you were at Salesforce and Microsoft back in the day, you're rubbing elbows with a lot of people. But now that's not the same landscape that we live in. It's happened so quickly.
It is one of the hardest things, Keenan, I think about every single day is how do you build culture and connections? And so we're hybrid. We have, as I mentioned, offices currently in Dublin, Krakow, Atlanta, San Antonio. We have people in Buenos Aires that we're going to open up an office for, and our folks in the Philippines are kind of spread out just because of the way that works. I think you have to be deliberate and intentional about it as an executive team and decide where you're going to invest. So, for example, we bring everyone together once a year at a company kickoff. We then so that's in February, and then we do a go-to-market summit in July or August where we bring the go-to-market teams together to talk about the back half. This year, we're committing to every team being able to get together on, so call that Q1 and Q2, Q3. And then we're committing every team can get together Q2 and Q4. So you will have 4 touch points if you're a remote employee, where we're bringing you together, we're helping you to onboard, you're building relationships. Like, I think it's priceless. And then the other thing I think as CEO, it's like, well, what else are you doing to build that culture and connective tissues in terms of what notes do you send out? I have a view from 30,000 feet. When I travel, I send a note out to let people know, well, what was I doing and what was I thinking about? I'm super deliberate about doing skip level 101s. So every 6 months, I meet with the directs of my directs, and every 6 months, I meet with every team. So I think you have to be deliberate, and I think you have to block time for it in a way that you may not have. I think the other thing that is making it work well is Slack or the equivalent. And I think, how do you do the little things? Like I host a book club for the company, and we get together, I don't know, every 6 weeks and read a book. And, people get to, I used to teach literature, and so it's one of the things I love doing. And other people respond, I don't know, 4 or 6 people, but they get to know me as not CEO. They get to know me as fellow journeyman on the, the path of knowledge. We do things like Ask Me Anything, where we feature people once a week and they can just ask them anything. And so I honestly, my head of HR and her team are fabulous at thinking about how do you build connective tissue in a hybrid environment. But I'm totally worried about it, Keenan, because people that aren't in the office, I think, have less ties to the company, right? Mm-hmm. They could be picked up by some other company tomorrow. And so unless you're creating alignment with the vision, with the leadership team, with their peers, and alignment with what they're doing, making an impact, so do that through like operating plans or whatever, like it's one call away before you lose them.
I mean, Dante makes this point pretty succinctly sometimes when we're on the podcast. He talks about how during the pandemic, employee engagement rates went up because they started seeing the CEO sitting in front of his keyboard, exactly like kind of you're sitting today, and it made a humanistic connection with that individual instead of thinking about them as like in an ivory tower. And so it's interesting how you have to be a human more so than ever in this digital age to create that connection.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the CEO that I served under when I sold Percolate to Seismic was Doug Winter, and extraordinary guy. And it was fun not being CEO for a while and watch a great guy do it. But he's the one that really committed this company kickoff. And they were run by investors like, well, that's a huge investment. And Doug was saying that I am not doing that. That is the thing that matters for us. And they've been hybrid remote for forever because all their development team was in China. And I took that away and I was like, yeah, absolutely. You got to do that. And if anyone's interested in chatting more, we've been down this path. I've written about it a bunch. There's a great company called Leader, Leadr. Their CEO, and I'm super impressed by their CEO and their founder. They're writing about this a lot. So again, I think it's just, culture happens whether you're deliberate or not. So as CEO, how do you get in front of that? And you're ultimately responsible, right, for the vision, the strategy, the culture, and the capital allocation. And the developing of the people, right? Especially the executive team. Those are probably the 5 things. I'm missing one, but those are 5 things that you solely can do.
When we're talking about hybrid work, people working from home, people in the office, how would you describe how you feel about your leadership style? Like, what's your leadership style in these environments?
Well, I don't know if my leadership style changes based on the work environment. What I'll tell you is I took this job in Atlanta because I grew up in Atlanta, but I live in Oakland. And it was at the end of COVID, and I was like, we've all been remote. This will be cool. I'll just do this. And the executive team is spread out around the U.S., and we have a commitment to being in Atlanta one week a month. To build relationships and to have conversations. I find that I'm more effective in person, and I think the meetings are more effective than being on Zoom, in part because you just get the social cues and people are participating and they can't multitask, right? And so be present, be now. I wish we could have more of that on Zoom, but I think we're all Zoom fatigue with the Hollywood Squares chart. So I would, if I had to do it again, I would probably prefer to be in an office environment, I don't know, call it 3 days a week, where you have an opportunity to, so I was just in Atlanta, literally. I was just in Atlanta last week, and I have this great guy. He runs our implementation. His name is Paul. He works his asses off. I don't know if I can say that, but I just did. He's just a good, great guy. And I just stepped outside of the office that I was working in that day, and I said, "Hey, Paul, you got a minute?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, Randy. Let's sit down." And I had 3 questions for him, and we spent 15 minutes together. He helped get smart on something where I was dumb, and I got 3 insights. I was like, "Oh, well, we need to do X, Y, and Z," and that would not happen without that. Paul and I meet once every 6 months. I of course could meet him if he wanted to meet more than that, but that's kind of the regular sequence. Maybe I would slack him if I had a question. But it's just so different for me personally to be in the milieu with people and just having that opportunity over a coffee or over a lunch. But you can't, to make it work, you can't then also have everybody come in the office, put on their headsets, and jump on Zoom meetings. So you have to be deliberate and intentional about how you're doing it. But that's different than my leadership style. My leadership style is, I've been told this since I was 10. I'm too intense. And what that shows up is sometimes for people that work for me, it shows up as intimidating. Is for people I work with, it's shown up as competitive. And for people I've worked for, sometimes it shows up as challenging. So I've been told this since I was 10. I've been working on it. I've gone to 20 years of therapy. I've gotten better. But I think the thing at the end of the day is, how do you as a leader drive people in a direction or help define the direction and help support people to move in that direction with urgency and dispatch, without stressing them out too much? Have you seen that? There's a great graph that shows effectiveness versus pressure. And you exert pressure, and people become more and more effective. And then you hit the point where they start to shut down. They start to shut down because they're starting to feel too stressed. It's stress. I guess it's stress and output or something. They're just too stressed. And so I'm constantly reminded of, okay, who is this person I'm working with? Where do they fall in the organization? I apply more stress to my executives than I do to the individual contributors. But how do I create productive stress in helping them think about different ideas? Let's explore something, talk about the metrics of success and what's working, so that they feel like they are being challenged. And getting that dial right, it's never right. I'm either too hard or too soft. And but I do think what I tell people is, my hope is that they work in an organization that I'm leading, that they walk away from it feeling like, God, that was one of the hardest jobs I ever had, But boy, I felt totally inspired, excited, and motivated. I learned more than any other job I had. And I think that's, those are the leaders that I like to follow, that challenge me to be my very best. And that's what I hope I can be for the people on my teams.
How do you also balance that with yourself? Right. I mean, a book that I often bring up is there's a book called The Gap and the Gain by a guy named Dan Sullivan, who talks about people with highly ambitious mindsets often find themselves in a gap between where we are and where we're getting, and never really pay attention to the gain of how far we've come, which gives us a healthier perspective. So how do you kind of balance that act?
Yeah, I probably don't revel enough in the gain and focus on the gap. As a leader, I think one way you could do that is if you define, we call it an operating plan, you define what your goals are, and you have a scorecard, and your scorecard has metrics on it that are and targets associated with it. There are going to be ones that you're going to get right. There's ones you're going to get wrong. And I do think it's important, like we do a monthly all hands, and we walk through the core scorecard, and we call out the highlights, the things that we've been winning, and then we call out the things we're missing, and then talk about how we're going to mitigate that. I think there are times, like in the monthly all hands or in the quarterly meeting, where you just want to be celebrating success. And so we also use a great tool. I love it. It's called Bonusly. I don't know if you ever heard of it, where you can give token gifts to people. So like rather than spending a coffee card, I can give you some Bonusly points, and you can collect those points, and you can buy a gift card, or you can buy Maxio swag, or you can do whatever. But this building a culture of celebration for all the things that, to your point, that we've gained. We also have a wins channel in Slack. And so when someone closes a deal, they say thank you. And so I do, it's one of the things I was intentional about taking a job in Atlanta. Where are you guys? Where do you all live?
I'm in Vegas. Keenan is in Hawaii. Recently moved
Hawaii. Wow, right on, brother.
Yeah.
Well, you'll appreciate this then. I mean, Hawaii, we have a little place in Hawaii as well. Like, people are just nicer. You know what I mean? Just in general, like to your point, you're like out in the morning, they're surfing, they're drinking some coconut juice, and then they go to work. And in Atlanta, people are just nicer. They are. And so I think one of the reasons I was attracted to that company in context was because it was in the Southeast, and people are nice and they celebrate. And so going back to your idea about culture and how do you build that, I think that's a critical part, is how do you celebrate? At the end of the year, we do a review, and we talk about, hey, here's all the things that went well, and here's some things that went sideways. Here's what we gained, right? And we didn't have the performance that we wanted, so we had to be clear and honest about the gap. I think that's another thing, Keena. You develop trust as a leader if you are transparent with both your successes and gaps.
Yeah. And
then if you have a plan to address it, that's where you build confidence. And your goal is to have trust and confidence, right? That you can lead us in the right direction. And so I think those would be some things I think about.
Randy, I'd love to kind of switch gears a little bit, because I know being in the B2B space, especially in the SaaS space, marketing, advertising is always evolving. I'm sure it's so much different than it was 10, 15 years ago. I've been a marketer myself for quite some time. One of the things we talked about in our previous conversation was this idea of GSEO. What is that?
Oh,
and how are you guys?
You mean generative search?
Yep, generative search. Yeah. What is it, and how are you wrapping your mind around it?
Like, the world has changed. And this wasn't my idea. This is my demand gen guy who came to me in January and said, Randy, the world's changed. We have to change all the marketing. I was like, what? Like, we just signed the operating plan. We just put the budget in place. We can't do this. But just think about how you're using search. Like, I now go into Google and I ask a question, and it's giving the full answer in context, even before you get the clicks. And so if you're using chat, and I think what they're battling is an existential crisis. Like, I also go to ChatGPT and ask questions. I get much more robust answers. So my default now is ChatGPT, not Google.
Yeah, same.
That's changed in 6 months. 6 months that's changed for me. So I'm sure ChatGPT will figure out a way to monetize that more than just my whatever $20 a month that I'm paying. There'll be ads someplace, but Google is freaked out. You know where else that's impacted is in B2B marketing. If you're focused on the mid-market space, you're not necessarily working with the large analyst firms like Gartner, Forrester, and IDC. Like when I was at Microsoft and Salesforce, it was really important in terms of how you showed up in those Magic Quadrants and Wave reports. Yeah. For the last couple of years, G2 has been the source that when we interview our prospects, when they come on board, we say, hey, where did you hear about us? People go to G2 and they review our technology versus other people's. And we have all the data. G2 volume has dropped off a cliff in terms of people that are going there versus going to ChatGPT, Claude, and all the other ones. And so I think there's been an enormous shift. The other shift we've seen on just Google paid search versus SEO is they're putting a lot of value on branded terms. And that, so are you spending on brand versus are you spending on the direct keyword to drop into the website? So I think that is transformational as well. So I would tell you, like, if you're a CMO out there listening to this, there are a couple of groups that I would recommend joining. One is CMO Huddles it's hosted by a guy named Dreiser. Drew Neiser. Drew Neiser. Awesome dude. Has written a great book. He has a great podcast called Renegade Marketing. He has this thing called CMO Huddles that he gets people together, like, go and become part of that. The other one I love is called CMO Coffee Talk. It's was founded by a friend of mine in Seattle named Matt Hines, who runs a marketing agency, and it's in partnership with 6 Sense, which is one of the best technologies out there. And the woman who's now the CRO, she used to be CMO, is Lotney. And every Friday they meet. And I mean, on this call, there are like 40 CMOs. And somehow I got grandfathered into it because of my relationship with CMOs and for so long. And they're talking about all this stuff. And they have Slack channels on it. And so I think the cutting edge CMOs, like, go be with your people, go talk about what's happening, figure out what's working. But the world has changed.
Man, it's Dante has a phrase. What is it, Dante? Marketers ruin everything, right? It's like once they get their hands on something, they squeeze it, right? And him being a marketer and a very successful one, you guys squeeze it until there's nothing left there. So what do you think about kind of the future, right, of marketing and of business? One of the trends that we've seen is there's a lot of founder-led marketing, CEO-led marketing, where now Randy's expected to be on podcasts like this. He's expected to make content. How do you think that's been kind of integrated into your process of showing up, building brand authority and trust with the people behind the brand so you guys can win business?
Yeah, Keenan, it's a great question. I can talk specifically about what we experienced at Maxio, which I think speaks to this. I think as a CEO, you got to figure out what type of CEO you are. If you're an introvert tech guy, it's going to be super hard to do this. So I think that's where, like, again, having someone like me and more go-to-market oriented paired up with an original founder who's a tech person can work really well, because the tech person can do what they want to do, which is, build cold. I do think, so Maxio was a brand that was launched in 2022, right when I started. It was a new brand built on the back of 2 great brands, SaaS Optics and Chargify. And even 2 years later, we would go to conferences and we'd say, hey, we're Maxio. And they go, huh? And we say, Legacy SaaS Optics and Chargify. And they're like, oh, yeah, we know those guys. So I think that there is, be careful what you wish for as a marketer. Every marketer wants to launch a new brand. Well, how much money and time is it going to take to land that brand and get people talking about that brand? So then it's, okay, well, how do you build a brand? Well, you could do SEO. One of the things that I think about, and again, never an original idea, the CEO of Profitwell that sold to Paddle coined this term media-led growth. And he was the first one to do all the blogging, and then he got into podcasting. And he sold his company in large part because of the community he built around that. And so we've started a blog called SaaS Builders Pod, and it's not directly revenue generating in terms of I can't identify the deal that was closed because of a specific podcast, but it is an investment in the broader brand in an authentic way, and it's being built by me as an individual, and people follow that, and on LinkedIn it gets promoted more than if you had just Maxio post on LinkedIn. And I don't think Facebook works for B2B brands. I mean, you can post your holiday party, your sales kickoff party pictures, but like influencing buyers, where do you get to them is going to be, today I think it's primarily LinkedIn. And so, my goal is to build a large network and to have people have, like, if they don't have brand recognition, they kind of have us in the brand awareness loosely, like, hey, there's a Maxio thing out there. They may not even know what we do, but it's kind of like an association of a feeling, like, oh yeah, kind of a cool brand. See our Let's Go Maxio banner in the back, kind of, and they've seen it bouncing around in the ether. And then when they go in to make a decision around billing and automation, and they go to G2 or they do a search and they see the Maxio brand, there's like brand affiliation, if that's a way to talk about it. So I think that's the future, authentic brand building. And I think that becomes even more true in the world of AI, where people can generate LinkedIn posts with AI, they can generate blogs with AI. And so like I write stuff and I have AI augment it. I think you gotta, how do you retain your voice and insight? And then have AI help you tune it so maybe it's better consumable. Like I don't, on LinkedIn, I'm not the type of person, if you look at LinkedIn posts, you'll see people do lots of bullets, right? And short little bullets with a lot of little emoji thingy things. I guess that's what works to get people's attention. It's counter to the way that I write, which is classic, a thesis statement with supporting bullet points with data, and it's probably a paragraph. But I've had to learn to optimize the format for the channel, and AI helps with that. If you tune it and say, hey, make this AI, make this topic, make this post, tune it for a B2B SaaS technology founder between the age of 27 and 30, it will dial it in a bit. And it doesn't, I still have to have the core insight, but it can help.
Yeah, definitely an accelerator, not a replacement.
Or
Dante,
amplifier.
What do you got?
I think it's an
Amplifiers
accelerator
are the
and amplifier, right? It can really help you amplify, and that's where that velocity engine, my friend Jay Hallberger, people are interested in, is they're amplifying the message through broader segments that you wouldn't be able to spend money on because it's so expensive to get going.
Randy, for anyone listening who's inspired by your story and inspired by the idea of being a scale-up CEO, you said a few times, a bit tongue-in-cheek, I don't have an original idea, and I'm like, BS, but anyways. What are some books or podcasts that you would recommend them to consume to really augment some of the knowledge and learning that they're wanting to go through?
We're going to go on for an hour, but on my LinkedIn post, I was going to write a book and then I flamed out, but it's the 8 Secrets of Success for a SaaS CEO. And so that is the culmination of all the information I've had over the last, call it 10, 15 years. What was funny was I think there's a great guy, it's the CFO podcast. It's a book podcast. I can't remember his name. We'll follow up in the show notes. But we were chatting, and he reminded me of Peter Drucker's Effective Executive. I don't know if you all heard of that, but it's like 1950s. It's kind of dated, right? And it's male-oriented. All those disclaimers. When you read Peter Drucker, you're like, oh, I don't have an original idea. He's already thought of it all. So that's part of it, is I have this humility of recognizing the greats that have gone before. I think if you're focused on strategy, Playing to Win, one of the best books out there. I've used it at 4 different companies in terms of trying to take the arcane art of strategy and translating it into very actionable insights for a team and communication. I love the book Play Bigger. So if you're in B2B SaaS and you're thinking about category creation, that really is the seminal text in terms of thinking about all the different ways you would work on category. I think the other book that I recommend to people, like if they want to get into this, like how do we do operational rigor, it's called Execution by a guy named Bozzity. And it like that. When I read that book, I read it when I was at Microsoft, and I was like, aha, like I've seen the truth. This is how you create scalable systems and organizations to deliver value. There's 2 people that I would follow. There's a guy named Joel Trammell, TRAMMELL. He sends out a weekly newsletter. He's got a book called The CEO Operating System. Another one of those. I read that and I was like, wait, this is what I was trying to write about. And it was already written. He's from Texas. He's got this great Southern drawl. He's like the nicest guy in the world, but he's absolutely brilliant with the insights that he offers. And I'm trying to think about, there's another guy that's going to kill me because I didn't call him out. But the other thing I would say, just for CEOs that are listening, you didn't ask this question, I'm going to offer it anyways, is I think that there are 4 things you need to do. One is you need to get a mentor. And a mentor is someone who has been a little bit ahead of you in your specific stage and context. Like they've seen the movie before, and they're going to be your advisor, because a CEO, you're alone. Number two is a coach. And a coach is different than a mentor, in my opinion. A coach is someone who can help you in your interpersonal effectiveness. So when I was CEO of a public company, I had never worked with the board before. And so I had a CEO coach who was had worked with Apple executives and had helped other CEOs manage the board and helped me learn how to do a public company board. So mentor, coach, I think a peer group. And there are lots out there. This is what brought it up for me, because I've been in Vistage, I've been in Alliance of CEOs, I'm now in one called Venwise, which I highly recommend. And then Sam Jacobs is a great guy to follow on LinkedIn. He's got Pavilion, and he has a CEO group. But the idea is you want to be with other CEOs who are in the same context that you're in, and you just share stories. How do you manage the board? How do you talk about capital structure? So different than the mentor, it's more about kibitzing. And then the fourth group I would offer is your own personal advisory board. And so these are people who've known you for the last 20 years, if you're that old. You guys don't look at you that old. But they're people who only know you and care about you. And I think it's an incredible forum for when you're trying to make life decisions, like you want to change a job. I remember when I was looking at, when I was evaluating this opportunity at Maxio, I called my advisory board. We get together periodically, and I had this other opportunity about a month before this one popped. And I was like, oh, yeah, because I fall in love with everything. I thought, oh, this is great. We could totally make this work, and I can make this happen. And they said to me, Randy, everything you said you wanted, this isn't. So why are you pursuing it? And I got to this aha moment was because they like me, and they want me to come and do this. And so it was really helpful for me making the mistake, like dating that girl I shouldn't date. Or, you know what I mean? Like really? You want to do that? And so when Maxio came along, I felt like, oh gosh, this is great. And I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't had that advisory board. So those, I think, in addition to kind of rounding out your knowledge from books, I think those are four viable conversations or groups or relationships that if you're not spending time on that right now, the role of CEO can be really lonely. It's the only role that everyone can point to and said failed. Right? you leave a company, you can say, yeah, it was his fault, right? The board says, oh, it was his fault. The ELT says, oh, it was his fault. So unless you have your infrastructure around you, it can feel really tough.
Well, Randy, we have a tradition here on the podcast where our previous guest wants to ask you a blind question. Okay. So this is their question. What brings you the most amount of joy, and what keeps you up at night?
Wow. Well, okay. Can we just say my family, because that's what you're supposed to say, and it does. I love my kids, I love my wife, it's wonderful. But like, if you're talking like peak experience, you can tell I'm kind of like type AAA. It's skiing in the mountains and being in fresh powder on a bluebird day and being with some good friends and just like, oh my God, it is, you are in the flow state and doing the thing I love most. And so that's my favorite. And then what keeps me up at night? It's, obviously you want to hit the numbers. I think the most difficult decision you make as a CEO is when you have to let someone go, right? Because you build this executive team and you've made an investment in them and they've made an investment in you, that social contract, and you build Patrick Lencioni in his book about the 5 failures of a team, 5 dysfunctions of a team, talks about the core executive team is the first team, and they come together in a different way than does anyone else in the company. And when you have to let one of those people go, it's heartbreaking, and you're thinking about it, you're talking to the board about it, the individual doesn't know what's going to happen, and so you're just dealing with this strife for a while, and then you got to get clear. At the end of the day, it's professional, not personal, and if it's what's right for the business and you're the CEO, like you can delegate authority, but you can't delegate responsibility. You are ultimately responsible. So going back to the very beginning of our conversation, like if you're going to be the captain of the ship and you run aground, whose fault is it? It's yours, right? You can fire the navigator, you can fire whoever, but in the Navy, you run a ship aground, the captain gets fired. And I think that's one of the things as CEO is you're like, look, do I have the team in place that can help the business be successful? And by extension, what can I be doing?
Well, Randy, man, literally, I have so many notes here from my iPad that I was taking, and I just can't thank you enough, man, for the conversation today. Seriously, can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. Absolutely.
My pleasure. Loved it.